Welcome to the Design Thinking Mindset, transforming everyday work and passion projects. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Fernanda Correa. I'm Business Development at Spring to Innovation, and I'll be helping out with the webinar today. We hope you get a lot of value out of the session and enjoy the content, whether you're watching this live or on demand. In today's webinar about the Design Thinking Mindset, transforming everyday work and passion projects, we hope you get strategies for incorporating design thinking into daily work routines to enhance productivity and innovation. And we're privileged to have a special guest speaker today, Lee Kim. She's a human-centered designer, an engineer, and certified Lego Serious Play facilitator. She founded a community innovation lab, Design Dream Lab, where anyone with a giving heart can create an impact and dream of a better future. Lee loves building and fostering creativity through everyday experience and finds joy in connecting dots with other fun-loving and joyful human beings. She's also the subject of the New York documentary Wearable Tracy, which we highly recommend, where she explores her ongoing search for human connections, prompted by her pipe cleaner crowns and people's curiosity towards them. I'm sure she will mention the one she's using today. We'll also hear some insights from Nilofer Erdebil, founder and CEO of Spring to Innovation. She's a TEDx Ottawa speaker, author of the international best-selling book, Future Proofing by Design, and has dedicated her career to assisting organizations in achieving remarkable advancements through design thinking principles. So with that, I'll pass it over to Nilofer to begin today's discussion with Lee.
Thank you, Fernanda. And thank you, Lee, for joining us. Welcome, everyone in the audience. Thanks to those that were writing in the chat where they're joining us from. Today, we have an amazing webinar, Design Thinking Mindset, Transforming Everyday Work and Passion Projects. And you heard Fernanda introduce Lee briefly at the start, and we'll get to know Lee a lot more. You might notice that we call design thinking is also called human-centered design. And so we'll talk a little bit about the interaction of those two things as we move forward. So that being said, before we get started, maybe we can grab the next slide. And so we're going to put up a poll just to get a little bit of a better understanding of where everyone is coming from in terms of their knowledge and level of familiarity with design thinking or human-centered design. Could you vote in the poll whether A, you have maybe no idea what design thinking or human-centered design is, whether you've heard of it, maybe you've tried it or parts of it, maybe you use it all the time, and maybe you're an expert. And so we have the poll up, and I'm seeing people are voting on it. We'll give folks about 10 more seconds. What is your level of familiarity with design thinking or human-centered design? So I'm seeing the poll going, maybe 5 more seconds. If you haven't voted, let us know where you are on a scale of not a clue to I'm an expert on design thinking or human-centered design. Okay. And so as I'm looking at the results, maybe we can publish it. And so what I'm seeing is most people have either heard of it or they've tried parts of it. So about 32% have heard of it and 20% have tried it or parts of it. About 19% aren't familiar with design thinking or human-centered design, and 3% of us are experts, or 18% are using it all the time. So those are great numbers. So today we're going to get a little bit deeper into how design thinking is being used, but beforehand, maybe I can give a description of my definition of design thinking, and then we'll get Lee to share her definition of design thinking. And for those that are familiar with Spring to Innovation, we have a deeper clarity method that is based off of design thinking. And so when we work with clients, the design thinking aspect of deeper clarity is in the orange box, and it has 5 phases. So to me, design thinking is about understanding end users' needs better so that we can make sure that we're articulating the problem in a clear, concise way. And then as we understand the clients a little bit better, we can refine what we think the problem is, and then we can come up with ideas and prototype and test with the clients. So the 5 phases are empathize, where we understand the end user from a design thinking perspective, and then define, come up with the problem itself. And then afterwards, once we know what the problem is, it's a lot easier to come up with ideas and ultimately prototype and then test the solutions. In deeper clarity, we add in a lot more upfront around the alignment and understanding as a team what the problem is that we need to solve before we delve into design thinking. And we have some strategic foresight and mindset work that we do. But at the heart of it, it's about understanding end users and making sure that we're creating solutions that solve their problems and create a huge impact for them. And so that being said, I am super happy to welcome Lee. And Lee, maybe I can ask you, what is your definition of design thinking and the design thinking mindset and how you apply it every day?
Yeah, so when I think about design thinking, I think about a way to look at the world through a different perspective. It gives me a tool to look into different windows through which I can see your perspective. And you mentioned about empathy for users. It might be empathy for my mother. It might be empathy for my coworkers. It doesn't mean that I always have the windows open, but I have a way to open that window and being able to see it through their perspective. Hopefully, I will be able to gain their world views and then be able to speak the language that both of us can understand. So most likely, the way that I approach design thinking is not about the process, although it's really helpful to have the framework, is to be curious about the other person, be empathetic about what they're going through, and be experimental about the problems we're solving. And at the end, have the humility to know that I am not the one with the answers.
I love it. I love that. And it's amazing because you also associate it with not just work, but also personal lives to understand the people in our lives, like your mothers. Yeah. That's very fantastic. I love that. And so that's the definition of design thinking or human-centered design, as well as the mindset. And then can you talk a little bit about how you apply it every day around maybe something you might be wearing right now?
Yeah. People might be wondering, is this part of like a filter? Sometimes I go into Zoom and like, is it a filter? But the filter changes from the direction to direction. Yeah. So the way that I apply design thinking is not necessarily about business problems all the time. It's how I live my life. So it has to be intentional. Somebody actually asked me, what is design? And I say design is with the intention you have a purpose to change something. So for me, I have an intention to create human connections around the people that I don't know, maybe with the people I know already as well. So every day when I got on the train, so I live in New York City, I live in the end of number 6 lines, I always get a seat. And when I got on the train, I take out my pipe cleaners and then I start to weave my pipe cleaner crown. By the time I got to 42nd Street, I have it done. So it's about 45 minutes that I give myself. So you have constraint of time and you have constraint of the materials. And then you wear it. And by the time you put it on, that's where your intention materialize into something and start to have impact, if you want to call it, surrounding you and myself as well. So, it creates that kind of openness for people to approach me and say, like, rather than just saying, hey, who are you? Because there's no other cue that a person can come to me and talk to me. But now I gave them a cue, right? Like, hey, I'm open to a conversation. You can come to me and talk to me. Then they can come and talk or not, or maybe smile, or maybe curious. Maybe 3 days later, she will come and she'll ask me the questions. But I think the way that I approach design thinking or human-centered design is how can I open up myself so that others can approach showing their curiosity. And if that happens, then we have a human connection. And how can we then foster that human connection to a deeper relationship? So, when I look at things like, oh, I have to solve a problem, the problem doesn't have to be something that's like, I need to raise my revenue by X, Y, Z. It could be simple things like, can I make you smile today? can I have a conversation with you and you have no idea where I'm coming from? If that's a problem you want to solve, then what can you do to do it? And, you just have to come up with some idea that might or might not work. And through experimentations, you can actually figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, I love that aspect of it. And you do think a lot about the mindset of it and allowing people to create those connections with you too, especially through that. And I know you and I have had a couple of conversations in the past that have been fantastic. And you also mentioned that there's two different ways that people approach you or don't approach you. I guess maybe it's more their reaction
Yeah.
to it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, actually, because I've been doing it for the last 7 years, there are a lot more reactions I get. But when I first started in 2017, it all began when I forgot my friend's birthday. I really did not have a structure that I have developed now. In the beginning, I say I had a bird nest on my head. There was nothing structured about it. It was just like something on my head because idea was put something on myself so that I can be part of this view that people can come. So you can imagine me with a bird nest on my head with different colors. Some people will just like laugh, right? Because like, oh, there's a comical sight that I can just laugh. Some people get really uncomfortable, so uncomfortable that they will turn away from me or change directions on another corridor. If I get into the elevator, the person will turn away because it was so uncomfortable. And I didn't realize those things could happen, right? But over time, what I realized was that when something is so unfamiliar and people cannot make sense, like what is that? If it is like this, people might think, oh, somebody's birthday, she's wearing a birthday hat, it looks nice. But if it is not as nice, people are like, what is that on her head? I cannot make sense of it. And they become really uncomfortable, enough to cause them fear that they turn away. Or some people look at it and say, I don't know what that is, but I want to know. So the person is very curious, right? So she's not judging me, he or she is not judging me. And that person will actually approach me rather than run away. And they will say, what's the story? And then there's third person. They don't even know what I have on. They're like, oh, she has something on her head. I don't see it. So they just like kind of I blend in with all the other things, and the person who is curious is the person that I would like to get to know, and the person who is afraid. Eventually, when something makes sense to them, they will come around and actually ask questions. But the person who is so curious that they cannot hold back, they have to ask the questions. Those are really nice encounters I had. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it goes to the mindset and how people approach life and work is especially with change and especially when it's something really different. Some are super curious, want to learn more. Some are afraid and try not to get the change that's going on. And then others don't even notice the change that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. I love that. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you came to embrace design thinking in your work?
Yeah. So my journey into human-centered design is not business related, although it was sponsored by business. So I was born in South Korea, grew up there until when I was 18, but I left home. So I'm from a south coast of South Korea called Jeju-do, which is an island. And I left home when I was 11 to go to boarding school in Seoul. And then afterwards, I came to the state. So I didn't really have a relationship with my parents, right? And then I, graduated, started working here, and then I got married. Then I went back to Korea, and you might have heard of reverse culture shock. I was born into a culture, grew up in the culture for a certain age, and then I came here, and now I became another person. And you go back, and you have this two different worldviews, and they're not mixing well. So I had a huge fight with my parents, so big that they said, this is not working out. You're not my daughter. Just get out of the house and never come back. And I thought they were so wrong. I thought I was so right, that they were wrong to say what they're saying. They were wrong to think what they're thinking. And so there's argument that I was making, like, how could you do that to me? You're so wrong. And I came back to the state, but they kind of cut the communication. I cut the communication. And all of a sudden, all grown up, you became an orphan. Not that I don't have my parents, but I don't anymore, right? So I was in the state of like not knowing what to do. I didn't know how to navigate this world where like the answer is not there. And then I got a call from my HR asking whether I could go to this design thinking workshop. So I did. And the first thing that my design thinking instructor, Tracy, who became my friend later on, asked me is, do you know what empathy is? Of course I do. Empathy is putting myself into somebody else's shoes. And I thought about my mother. And I said, I know what she feels like. I'm a mother. I know what mother feels like. And she said, no, that's not empathy. I said, what do you mean? She said, 100% empathy for another person is impossible. Even if you were born in the same day from the same mother and you're a twin, you're going to have a different experience going through life. And you're not going to have 100% empathy with your twin. So how could you, just because you have a role of a mother, have 100% empathy for your mother? Empathy actually is asking questions. I wonder what it is like to be you. And so that totally shocked me. That night I went back to the hotel room and I thought about my mother before she was my mother. My mother was never not my mother. I lived my life thinking that she's always my mother. But I thought about this little girl who was born into a country that was torn by war and growing up, not having anything, getting married early and giving birth to a stillborn child. And then the second one who was born was a girl. And all of those things are coming through me. And I thought, like, I didn't know my mother. And that was a breakthrough for me to think about maybe the world is not about knowing the answers that I have, but it's about opening my mind to ask questions. I wonder what it is like to be you. Can you tell me? Because I have no idea. So that was my opening to human-centered design. So it's never, for me, about what kind of business problem I'm trying to solve. It's about who are you who is going through this problem? And can you tell me a little bit more about the world you're living in so that we can uncover the problem together? And of course, you can apply this in business, right? But I don't think design thinking is about business problem solving. It's about being human. And I'm an engineer like yourself. And I have learned to solve problems applying formulas and going from point A to point B. But sometimes that might not be the way to look at the world and solve problems. And more often than not, although you can solve the problems by doing 1 + 1 is equal to 2, oftentimes we just have to ask yourself, whose problem is this?
Yeah.
Maybe you do not even know the numbering systems. So I think that's how I got into design thinking. And in many ways, I'm actually grateful for having a failed relationship with my parents that really forced me to be in that shoes and be able to walk through that journey. I went back and I apologized to my mother, and we kind of repaired the relationship. It's not the same as before, but we are on our journey. And I think if anybody is thinking that human-centered design or design thinking is about solving business problems, I think we need to open up our eyes a little bit wider, open our hearts a little bit wider, and say, whose problem is this? And do you really have that curiosity, the humility to ask the other person, could you please tell me more about who you are, what problems you're having, the world you're living in? Yeah.
I love that aspect of it. I think it's huge. We mostly work with businesses and organizations, and we start out with the premise that we are solving business problems, and we are, but there's a huge amount of thinking ahead of time and perspective taking and mindset shifting that ends up happening to allow people to see things from a different perspective. And it's the people that are using their products, their services, the people that they have relationships with. It might be partnerships, it might be employees, but at the end of the day, it's about getting curious about the people in there. And that's why I started as well too with design thinking, is after having deployed products and services that took a long time for people to start using them, is looking at it from their perspective is like, well, what is it like to be them? What is
Yeah.
it like to be a senior citizen, or what is it like to be a mom? What is it like to be a child? What is it like to have no technology that is around you and to have to use technology? And so there's a lot of curiosity that's involved in there for sure. You and I chatted a lot last time too, when we chatted about culture. And you're talking a lot about curiosity and getting people to think differently. How do you create a culture that encourages creativity and innovation in organizations? And how can you be creative in any environment?
Yeah. I think I will be arrogant to say I can create culture. But I think what I can control is me. So I'm being truly authentic to myself. I say, if I cannot come into an organization being who I am, that culture might not be the one for me. If I'm in an organization where the culture is being shaped, then I could kind of see where it is going, right? So I think the culture is showing, like I can show myself like this, and I start by actually going to an interview like this. And if my hiring manager is not willing to take me as who I am, then they can say like, oh, Lee is kind of crazy. I don't want that person in my team. But if the person is willing to take the risk of bringing me in, although I'm wearing crazy hat, there might be something there. Is already you as a person who is going into an organization already have a filtering process to know whether the culture is the right one, because when you go into the organization, the culture is already there. Within the organization, then I think I can create an environment where if somebody's coming into my team, where they can be themselves and where I can push a little bit more about, I think I am being very judgmental in this space, and I would like to know what you are thinking about this. Like I can be very vulnerable about where I am standing, but it starts from me being who I am. I was actually talking to someone, and I said, how do I create a team, not whole company's culture, but team culture that is trusting? And the person actually told me, you have to start with you trusting. It's not like, how can I create the team to trust me or trust each other? I have to show my vulnerability by showing that I trust. But, so I thought that was a really interesting idea. And I'm hoping that I'm doing that by just showing myself as who I am, telling them I'm a little afraid on this side. I'm a little comfortable on that side, but uncomfortable on that side. So if I have to create a culture, of course you have to be yourself and invite others in to talk about who they are, understanding where they are also coming from. And I think before we talk about what are we gonna do, we can also define who we wanna be. So, if in my small team, at least that's what I try to do. I'm not quite sure if I'm becoming a great culture creator, but at least that starting point of who do we want to be and who I am coming into this, and be authentic about who we are moving forward is something that at least you can visibly see. Like I'm putting my intention out there, and then I'm making sure that at least there is something that you can see I'm trying. I'm not perfect, but at least I'm really, really trying hard to to be that person that kind of tells you or asks you about the stories that you are going to share. Yeah, so I don't know about the culture in a way that I can create, but I can tell you the culture that I would like to be in is where I can be truly authentic and allow others to be authentic themselves.
Yeah, I love that. I think you are helping create the culture, especially around creativity and innovation by showing up as yourself. And we do a course for executives and leaders around design thinking for leaders. And we talk a lot about authenticity as well as creating trust in teams and letting people understand how they show up for work and the impact that it has on the people around them as well too. And you naturally show up as curious. And so I think that helps the whole team as well too. Maybe as we are thinking about design thinking too, how do you create real impact using design thinking or human-centered design? And maybe do you see a difference between the terms human-centered design and design thinking?
Yeah, so in the beginning, because I was trained as a design thinking, I actually used design thinking. But because people get tripped up by thinking and design, because you first have to kind of define design, and you have to define is it only thinking. You run into just explaining, oh, design thinking was developed by people who are in the design. The way that they think is like this process of like knowing the users. You kind of go into this explanation mode rather than what it is, right? Human-centered design, it needs less explanation. Human-centered, I can just say, we are being human, being curious, being empathetic, and it's design, it's intentional, iterative, and things like that. So personally, I prefer human-centered design rather than design thinking, but it's, for me, it's the same thing. It's just how I find it to be easier to explain or how people react to the term itself. And the question that you asked, the first one was, how am I creating real impact? I think impact is a strange word for me because, impact sounds like a big wave, right? Big wave that you can kind of see from far away and you can kind of say that this has happened. But impact for me is actually small little pebbles thrown in, and you can see that disturbing whatever it was there. And then if you can see enough of it, it becomes almost like a bubble. My daughter loves like this bubble guns and from far away, it's not a big bubble, but these little bubbles create this beautiful scene where like, you're running towards it. That's kind of impact that I would like to create, that I would like to seek to create. And for example, if I were to create an engagement with another person beyond Wearable Tracy, and I'm working in a medical, biopharma company, I'm not going to create something for 1,000 audience. I'm going to start small with maybe 20 people. But impact that I measure at the end is, have you had a meaningful experience because I created this experience with you, for you? And at the end, did you have something different? Did you feel impact yourself? Not that I can measure like, oh, impact of what I have created was this, but true impact was felt by the person who is participating. So those are same way, right? Same way when I wear Wearable Tracy, I went to MoMA this weekend and I met a person and I told her I cannot give to you because it's not 5 yet, but I can send it to you. And she, sent me an email back and she said, I felt there was something inviting about what you're doing. And that's an impact. I cannot measure it, but she felt it, right? So it's a joyful impact that I would like to create. And hopefully in business, you can actually do the same thing. You don't create big impact first. You create a little bit of impact here. That kind of goes into a bigger bubble. And then like this, like multiple bubbles. And from far away, you can see it. But you don't start by creating that big wave and create the impact. So I think because of the iterative nature and experimental nature of human-centered design, that's possible. You don't think going into it, I'm going to know the answers right away. And I'm going to say like, this is going to create 5 million views. But if I start with something and say like, okay, like, you know, this created a joyful reaction from 5 people. Why did that happen? And then you can actually go further and further and further. So instead of targeting millions of people, you're actually targeting one person, that one interaction.
Yeah.
And then see if that made a difference, if that was felt, then what was the magic in that connection? And you can actually multiply that. So I would love to continue to create that impact that you can feel, that you can see in one-on-one interaction first, and then amplify it further into a larger audience.
I love that. And you touched on a number of really great points. Something that we don't talk enough about, I think, is the iterative nature of human-centered design as well, too, is as you learn more and more information, is pulling it back, and with more information, more impact. And it's continuous, but it starts with one person at a time, for sure. Can you tell us a little bit about the Big Bang Collaborative?
Yeah. So, you know, the TV show Big Bang. I used to watch that all the time. And, you know, it starts with the song. And at least one of the theory, how the universe began, was through Big Bang. So in 2020, when we were all stuck in this space of pandemic and, you know, a virtual world, because I was working in the space of medical conferences, and that was the space that was disrupted or came to a huge halt. First thing I did was, what can we do to kind of find solutions together? So I brought people from different medical biopharma companies, medical associations, designers who are involved in this space, but they're also very giving and wanted to kind of collaborate. And so instead of creating something that was sponsored by one company, I actually asked my leadership whether it's okay for me to do external collaboration with all of these people. They gave me permission. So I created this outside external think tank called Big Bang Collaborative, invited, you know, medical associations and biopharma companies and designers to come and reimagine future of medical conferences. Because it has been disrupted for the last 100 years. It has been forever the same. What was beautiful about Big Bang Collaborative was that I posed a question: if we don't have funding, because we didn't, and we don't have a support from large companies, but we all have this like huge heart and this desire to change the future, what can we create? That was the question. What if we use the methodology of human-centered design to design the future of medical conferences? What will happen? So the first thing we had to do was, like, do people know human-centered design? Maybe not. So we actually had 2 days of human-centered design, virtual human-centered design workshop. And, you know, we had 50 different people coming in. And who is going to actually lead these workshops? Because as you know, workshops has to be with facilitators and coaches. And it's not like, you know, it's not like a webinar, I can just talk. So I posted on LinkedIn, hey, we're thinking about creating this amazing experience for future of medical conferences for the, you know, doctors, nurses, and people who are involved in medical community who really deserve to have a better experience when they come to medical conferences, and which will actually in turn create better patient care. We would love to bring human-centered design to this space, but we don't have money because we didn't. Anyone willing to help? And I had people from India, from England, from Netherlands, from all over the world volunteering their time, the facilitators. And they were amazing facilitators, Canada as well. And so we were able to do kind of like educating people around human-centered design. And then afterwards, now that we have this language that we can speak, we were able to create experimentations and create prototypes product. And, you know, one of my favorite project from this one is called the Situation Room, where, you know, you might think, oh, you know, you might want to create this beautiful virtual experience. And what we wanted to create was real human connections, where people come in and collaborate and learn about each other, not about their titles and their status, but about their lived experiences. So in the beginning, it was me asking people like, who would like to partner with us to actually execute this, right? Because you can have amazing ideas, but if there is nobody to really go out and do build and test, nothing is actually real. So we were able to have it prototype test iterated at first in 2020. So Big Bang Collaborative was born in 2020. The idea for Situation Room was born in 2021. And then, through many different iterations in 2022, we were able to execute the first real life Situation Room with maybe 25 doctors in San Francisco. And now I don't even know how many we have done. And that kind of shows if we limit ourselves to funding, there is something that you always have to kind of, rely on. But if we rely on these humans who are amazing at collaborating, giving, singing the future together, I think that was probably like one of the things that, you kind of like restore your belief in humanity. Like, because you don't know who's going to show up when you ask for people, for volunteers, because because it's hard, but that really restored my belief in humanity, that there are people who are willing to give, and there are people who are willing to test, and there are people who are willing to really go out and scale it, right, when people say it. But there is also this idea of the initial, where we can bring people together and start that journey. And so, so Situation Room, Big Bang Collaborative is still going on. Through times, like this summer, we're taking a little bit of break. But again, I think that's just one example of my external collaboration with other people. But that's also making me to think about another part of human-centered design is this collaborative nature. That you cannot really do it alone. There's no lone genius who comes up with ideas and say like, okay, this is it, you go do it, right? At least for me, it gives me hope that I don't have to have all the answers. I call it collective genius. All of us together is so much more stronger, smarter, more compassionate, and better than one single genius that is in the room, which is not me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the collaborative component of it, collective intelligence, it's huge.
Yeah.
And so you also mentioned you do a lot of other work too. Maybe you could talk a little bit about Design Dream Lab and what is around that, and what impact you've seen it make in the community.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I was an engineer for about 15 years, and then I was recruited to Pfizer because of the nature of human-centered design that they wanted to implement. But when I joined, nobody told me, but I just made an assumption that when I go into a large company, I'm going to hear a lot of no's. You cannot do that. We don't do it here. And I really needed a place of yes. So I asked around and I said, hey, would you like to create a community where you don't have to have a certificate in human-centered design, you don't have a master's degree, but what I ask is you have this heart that you think the future is better. You have this belief that we can actually create something better than what we have today. And so I created I call it like a collective, it's not even an organization, it's just like something that we as team of people come together, and we created the Design Dream Lab. And we named it Design Dream Lab because we wanted to be a design with the intention, right? And dream because without our imagination to think about the future that's better than what we have and dream about that, it's going to be impossible to see that future happening. And lab, because we want it to be a place of experimentation and learning. So we call it Design Dream Lab. And at first it was just like us coming together to kind of throw everything on the wall and see what sticks. And eventually we created a product, a couple of products. And one of the things that we are all also very proud of is something called the Memory Kaleidoscope, where you can prompt memories from people by sharing artwork. And I actually tested with my parents and it worked out pretty well. Sometimes if you just ask your parents, oh, tell me about your childhood, they all have the same stories. But sometimes when you look at the art and ask them, which one of these art prompt a memory about your childhood, certain images bring such a weird memory that you will never talk about. So we created a card game actually for immigrants in New York City. It was requested by Queens Public Library, where they saw a lot of immigrants coming into their neighborhood. And they come to the library to borrow books, but they saw that the relationship between the parents' generation and the children's generation was somewhat broken because they didn't know, the children did not know the history of their parents or grandparents. So they wanted us to design a game that promotes that memory sharing. But the limitation was because there are so many languages spoken, they wanted to be more of a visual language rather than written language. So we created that, and that was really powerful when we saw how people are actually able to share the stories, and not only just for the library, but also for people who are creating art. There are just vocational high school students who share the story through this card game, and then the other students made jewelry, and it's special because it's not just earring with sun and rat. It's a story of her friend who has seen a rat in the sunset. So like, who is going to think about that if you didn't have these memory sharing programs? So I think what I have also learned through this is community is alive. It's not just one, whoever came in will stay forever. We also had a death in the community. And the one that really kind of touches me was we had a death in the community, but he would invite his wife when he was still alive to come to this virtual gathering during COVID. And, she remembers particular sessions. And then when he passed away, she reached out to me and said, like, my husband really enjoyed your community gathering. Can I come? And so, she has been coming to the gathering for last couple of months. And that kind of thing where can we create connections between people who we do not know and people who we kind of know? And then when the person passed away, the other person also see the impact that the community created for that person and kind of carries on. So Design Dream Lab is a place where I feel where community is really something that you build with others and is alive, and how do you care for your community all kind of comes together with this iterative approach of human-centered design. But all to say that I started because I needed a place of yes. Because this place, we made sure that like if somebody has an idea, you just bring it and we will try to co-create, make it happen. And we don't ask, oh, we've never done that before. Actually, that's pretty good that we've never done that before, because then we can do that, right? Or, oh, we always do it this way. Well, it was a new community, so there's no history of like, we've always done it this way. We always go with, oh yeah, why not? What if we try this way? And power of rituals and things like that. So I think in different ways, Design Dream Lab gave me that place where I can breathe a little, because your work can sometimes kind of close you in to a certain place. So if you have a place where you can go out of that closed-in space and expand your views or relationships or possibilities, I would really encourage you to seek those places. If you don't have it, create one. Invite others to come to that space. And if that dies down, that's part of nature, right? You go through the natural process of giving birth and then growing and then dying, and that's okay.
Yeah, and you're out there, you're trying, and you're connecting too, which is huge.
Yeah.
We only have a few more minutes left. I have one more question, but if folks have questions that they want to ask, if they could pop it into the Q&A, that would be really amazing. My last question for you is, what advice would you give someone new to design thinking or human-centered design who wants to start applying it in their projects, and then also for leaders to enable human-centered design in their teams? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, and it's all based on my own experience. So, somebody else's experience might be different. But I would like to say, just start small. This might have been something that I just started with one day thing. It doesn't have to be all big, but also another thing is, I think it's really important to have partner. So even this, I actually have a partner, my daughter, right? She inspires me, she gives me drawing. At work, if you can find partners who understand your language, then you can co-create those things. Another thing is I don't think too much, but I do a lot. So in order for me to figure things out, instead of like kind of evaluating every possibilities, I actually test things out. You might have heard, failure to do is failure to learn. If I do something, I learn, and if I learn something, I can do. So if you are doing anything in your team, rather than asking for perfect ideas, just to, try something, build something, show something, and then see what happens, rather than prove what you have done is correct. Actually try to learn from each one of the iterations. So yeah, be experimental, go out and do things, find your partner, start small. Those are the things I have learned in my decade of journey into human-centered design.
I love that. And as you were telling one of your stories earlier, you talked about having like the 2 days of training and then making sure that everyone's using the same language as well too. And so that language component I find really resonates with me, and the clients that we've had too, is that common language, common understanding really helps move things forward too. How about for leaders? Any advice for leaders that are looking to support their teams that are
Yeah,
using human-centered design?
I think they have to take risk in some ways. When I first came into Pfizer, I was actually thinking that the leadership might not really get it, but my manager took risk of bringing me in, and maybe they didn't succeed in doing everything they wanted, but I think there was a switch that came up to some things about like, what if we do it this way? So the first part is, this is not regular everyday practice, right? It takes some time. You have to give it some time. You cannot expect it to be completely changing the world in 6 months. I think I actually begin to see how things work in 2 years within an organization. But I think the first thing is, there has to be in order for it to grow, there has to be a duration of discomfort, right? Otherwise, you're not growing. So for the leaders who are out there, I have appreciated the leaders who took risk and say like, okay, let's give this a try.
Yeah, and get comfortable with that discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you just phrased it, that you look for a 2-year period rather than like even a 6-month period. And there is a lot of expectation of immediate result, and there can be for sure,
Yeah.
but even more so longer term impact after 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely do like, design thinking boot camp and coming up with quick ideas, and you can try to leverage those. But in order for it to see the real impact, I think because you have to get people to buy into the stories and the way they work, behavioral change does not come in, in one semester, 6 months. So give yourself a little bit of time to grow into that kind of mindset. Sometimes it can be hard because you're measured by quarterly results.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Especially if you're doing innovative work as well, too.
Yeah.
There's eyes
There
watching.
definitely is a reward at the end. I can guarantee you that's so true. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any questions that others want to have to pose to Lee? Because I have a whole bunch more, so I could keep going. If I don't see any questions, can you chat a little bit about the connection? Oh, actually, there is a question here. Can you talk a little bit about humility and what that brings to human-centered design?
Oh my God, I love that question, Natalie, because we were trained to be expert. That when you're brought in, you have to have answers. It gives me so much relief knowing that I don't have answers, right? But it's really uncomfortable to say that I have no answers right now, but would you be willing to go on this journey to discover this together? So I think the humility, first of all, it's not just the saying, I'm just coming into this one and I have no idea. I actually had I'm hoping my manager is not listening to this. So, he told me one thing and I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to do that. And, you're expected to, right? At a certain level, you're expected to know the answer. So I said, you may not have signed up for this, but I have no idea how to do that. Would you please help me to understand that process so that I can be better prepared? I can say that because now I have learned to say things that I don't know. I don't pretend to know. Like some people say, what is it? Fake it until you make it. But I actually say, just to admit certain things that you don't know. Of course, you have to trust your leader, right? You're not going to say that to everyone, but I am comfortable to say that I have no idea that what you're asking me to do. Can you please show me some examples of it, how I can do it better? And you do that with your user testing or customer research as well. You go in, you don't pretend to know what nurses are going through or what clinicians are going through. You tell them, I have no idea what you're going through. So please explain to me your day, from the time you wake up to the time that you go. Maybe you pick on one day and can you just walk me through your day? And please don't be bothered if I ask you to clarify a few things or go deeper into certain things. I think if you say that in the beginning, that I'm here as a beginner, I don't know your world that well. I have read about it, but I could be so wrong about my assumptions. So I'll be asking for some details if I don't understand. Please understand that it's not to disqualify what you're saying, is to really understand what you're going through so I can design things with you along the way. I think that is so much, it gives me comfort to know that I don't have to be an expert in everything. And we can actually co-create the solutions with people who are going to be actually using the solutions rather than me pretending to know based on my Google search or, now with the ChatGPT.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that beginner's mindset and humility is
Yeah.
key to getting even more insights from your end users. And I think it allows them to share more too, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you ask them to tell me more. Like, tell me more is one of the best questions you can ask, right? Because
Yeah.
you just want to learn more about where they're going. So thank you, Natalie, for asking that question.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I love that. We are at the end of our time. Lee, I would love another hour or two with you to talk because I have so many more questions around your experiences as well. You mentioned the community and the network component of it. Spring to Innovation has a LinkedIn community, the Deeper Clarity Network, that we're trying to grow and expand as a safe space for people to ask questions, share insights as well. So if you want, you can join that too. And just to close off, Lee, thank you so much for being here. And maybe I can hand it over to Fernanda to share some of the other material that we have coming up as well. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leah and Nilofer. I think it was a great conversation, very insightful. And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you all also found this really insightful and that you're living with valuable knowledge and strategy where you can apply to your daily life and work. We encourage you to continue exploring Deeper Clarity with our LinkedIn network and all our channels. For those of you who may have joined us late or wish to revisit any part of today's session, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar with additional resources soon, so keep an eye for that. Additionally, we would love to hear your feedback today. So when you log off, there's going to be a survey, and we much appreciate if you could answer that. Our next webinar is August 28th. We'll have another guest speaker, Kristia, talking about building innovation, integrating serious Lego play with design thinking. And for more information about deeper clarity or design thinking, don't forget to check our website, follow us on social media, to check our upcoming webinars and events. And we have some nice topics coming up. Thank you all for your participation and for being here. We truly appreciate your time and interest. And enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye to all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.